I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Michael,
Yes, sir.
Stratum Tire, do we know if we're getting the state rate on those?
I'm not sure, but I believe that question was asked last year, and Tim said yes.
Can we just double check to make
Absolutely.
sure we're still getting the state bid on that?
Yep.
Thank you.
To look before I ask.
Makes more sense.
No, don't.
You sure?
No.
Okay.
Go.
You're welcome. Anybody else have any interest? Motion to approve it?
Make that motion.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Minutes of the last meeting. Any changes?
Make a motion to approve the minutes of Wednesday, December 3rd, school board meeting, as
So-
written.
Second for discussion. What are we gonna do with the Back Bay contract? I mean, I know Milton's budget's already been done, but I don't feel it's fair for the Wakefield taxpayers to have to eat $9,000 on the split on the Back Bay contract.
At the joint SAU board, the board decided as a whole to ask Michael to look into all shared contracts and that we wanted them all brought up to the next meeting so that we could discuss them. We wanted a list of them, and that's what the joint board.
But being this is budget season, this would be an appropriate time to make any adjustment. So I just don't want this to go by the wayside, you know, come January 1, because budget, or, you know, whatever it is after budget season, and then this is all forgotten, and the Wakefield taxpayers eat $9,000. That's not right.
No, I think it needs to be discussed, and you were gonna get those breakdowns for us so that we could have a full discussion with the full board on that, and we really need to make a decision on what we need to do with that.
We need to protect the taxpayers, the Wakefield taxpayers.
When's our next joint meeting?
Is the motion on the table?
Yeah, move the question. Move that motion.
All set, Steve? We can move the motion. All in favor?
Right.
Aye. Any reason why we can't do the non-public?
Make a motion to approve those minutes as written for non-public December 3rd, Wakefield School District.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Public comment? Having none, seeing none. New business, Mr. Turson?
Yep, thank you, Madam Chair. This evening, we have Barrett Christina from the New Hampshire School Boards Association here to give a presentation. It's titled Effective School Board Meetings. I had sent this information out to the board maybe 4 weeks ago and brought it up at a board meeting and had asked Mr. Christina to come this evening to give a presentation on that information and answer any questions that the board might have regarding the information. And I believe he also brought some hard copies of that information if someone would like.
Great.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you, Michael, thank you for
Thank
having
you.
me. Thank you to the Wakefield Board for asking me back again. I think I recognize most of the people at the table. You know, some of you have attended NHSBA training sessions, and I know I've been up a couple times in the last 2 years to do some various trainings. So the document that Superintendent Tercey emailed you and the document that I'm passing out now is a presentation that I conducted at the 2014 Kidder Law Conference back in October, entitled Effective School Board Meetings. This was done in response basically to member feedback. And HSBA, as you all know, does a lot of training, and a lot of that training relates on more effective meetings, handling motions, roles of the board chair, handling public comments, things of that nature. So I'm here and speaking with your superintendent. I know I see you've got a full agenda, you've got a lot of people in the room, so I'll try and keep this to about a half hour or so, if that works for the board. But by all means, you know, I'm happy to stay as short or as long as the board desires to impart the information that I can do. Those of you that have seen me do training before, I hope you recognize that I don't like to sit here and sort of dictate or lecture and just have you take notes as to what I say. It's going to be a lot more effective for everybody if we can get this to be somewhat informal and engage in a back and forth and ask questions as they come up, and I'll do my best to answer them. So I'm going to go through, I'm certainly not going to go through, as you see, the document itself is about 20 pages long. I'm going to try and hit, I don't know, maybe a half a dozen, maybe 8 or so sort of major topics and points that you know, I believe and NHSBA believes are pertinent topics for boards to consider in trying to get through their meetings effectively. So on page 2, getting to the sort of the gist of the presentation, I get a lot of questions about, you know, what goes on the agenda or what topics are, you know, within the proper board purview, or how do topics get on the agenda? Is that developed by the superintendent? Is that developed by the board chair? Is that done collaboratively among, you know, with all the board members present? If you look at that middle portion, those middle bullet points there, when we're developing the agenda, setting aside for a minute who develops the agenda, but when we're talking about what topics should go on the agenda, be mindful of what the primary roles and responsibilities of a school board are. And those of you that have attended some of the NHSBA roles and responsibilities training, we talk about maybe the half a dozen or 8 major topics that school boards are in charge of. First one, establishing policy. You've probably heard me say that 1,000 times, hopefully. 2, setting a district budget. As Mr. Brown mentioned, we're in budget season. You're developing your budget right now. That needs to be finalized. 3, hiring and evaluating the superintendent, primary board function, perhaps the most important school board function. 4, the occasional hearings, discipline, non-renewal, grievances, student discipline, things of that nature. 5, collective bargaining. I don't know how many unions you have here or whether you're engaged in collective bargaining this year, but obviously another primary board function. And 6, strategic planning and establishing long-term and short-term goals for the school board and for the school district. I think if we try to develop our agenda items within the context of these half a dozen sort of major topics, I think it helps streamline the process and helps the board identify what major topics it should be spending its time on, and then placing those items on the agenda. Not necessarily all of these per se, and this isn't an exhaustive list by any means, but this is, I think, generally the general gist of it. So when you're thinking about whether or not this is a proper topic for your agenda, try and see if it fits within one of these, criteria. And if so, then it's likely a proper topic for the board to discuss. Sir?
Reading down the last paragraph, it talks about free and open debate on issues.
Yep.
And we're in the process of evaluating the superintendent. We were told at the joint school board meeting that just 2 people would be involved in discussing the issue with the superintendent, the chairs of the both boards. And I don't know, is it, I guess the reason for that is because it's the way it's always been done.
Okay.
My position is, if all of us have been involved in the hiring process, why shouldn't all of us be involved in discussing the issues with the superintendent?
Sure. My opinions on that are couple points. First, check to see if there are any policies at the SAU level that speak to the superintendent's evaluation. If they are, they may dictate the process. If the majority of the board believes a different process should be followed, and you have a policy, then by all means, the SAU board can speak and amend and change that policy. First point. Second point, I'm of the opinion, and other trainers and may have different thoughts, but my personal opinion is that all board members should be involved in it. As you said, all board members are involved in hiring the superintendent, because presumably all board members sit in on the interview, discuss the contract, engage in the hiring process. The third point is, if you read the Department of Education Rule 303.01, I forget the subparagraph, but it's in the duties and roles of school boards. It says that the board shall evaluate the superintendent, and I read that as being the board as an entity and as a whole. The last point on that, and I've done, we can do a 2-hour training on superintendent evaluations, and I think we have one scheduled in Concord later this spring, maybe in an April, May, June timeframe, so check our calendar online. Is that whatever process you use, I think it should be, to a degree, mutually agreed to with your superintendent. Have a conversation at the SAU level, sit down with your superintendent and say, these are the forms we're thinking about using. How do these seem fair to you? Or this is the time frame we're looking at for conducting your evaluation. Do you think that works within the context of goal setting and your schedule and things of that nature? But to the main point of your question, I think it's best when all board members are involved in that.
Thank you.
Any follow-up questions on that? No? Okay.
I just have one.
Sure.
Where we share an SAU, I guess in the past, it's always been the 2 chairs of each board that does that.
Mhm.
How would you suggest that we address that issue with the other board that wants it to be that way?
Sure. put it on the agenda for an SAU board meeting. And by all means, if you would prefer that, if it would be assistive for this board and the SAU, for me to put my thoughts in writing, I'd be happy to share that with Michael or the board chair or the board.
Could you do that for us,
Absolutely.
please?
If
That would
somebody
be
could
great.
send me a follow-up reminder email to do that, I'd be more than happy to put my thoughts down on paper and get those off to you. More than happy to do that. Moving on, the major topic here, we're talking about establishing goals for the board and general concepts. We talked about the half a dozen or so major topics. Jump to page 3, the second full paragraph there. Again, just going to try and highlight what I think is a major topic on each page. The paragraph that begins, a process should be in place. A process should be in place that would allow board members to add items to the agenda, but generally limited to a time period prior to the meeting and not the day of the meeting, except in emergency or extenuating circumstances. Again, this is going to be handled by local policy. What does your local school board policy say about board members being or asking that certain items be placed on the agenda? I know the NHSBA sample policy generally states that the superintendent and the board chair are responsible for developing the agenda. However, any board member can ask that an item be placed on the agenda. I don't think our sample policy has a time period, but you know, presumably before it goes out. I don't know how soon, 72 hours a week before the meeting, you know, you get your board packets either via email or in the mail. You know, I think that's generally fair. The reason that we want to put a time period on it is the thing that I don't like as an individual representing school boards, and I know administrators don't like it, is surprises at board meetings. I think the agenda should generally be free from surprises. Everybody should have a fair opportunity to understand what's coming down the pike and what's going to be on the agenda for that meeting. It helps the public as well too. You know, it doesn't help if, you know, you got your agenda set and then you come to a meeting and that's been posted and it's on your website, and you come and you've got a half a dozen new topics that the public may not have been properly warned about. So look at your sample policy. Again, this is all going to be dictated by policy. You know, whatever it's 72 hours a week, whatever that time period is, but board members should be free to email the superintendent or the board chair and say, I'd like the playground issue to be on the agenda for the next meeting. Questions on that? Great. Let's jump to page 4, getting into sort of agenda setting now. I learned a lot when I was putting together this presentation, again, in response to member feedback. I read a lot of articles from all over the country about, you know, best practices in terms of putting the agenda together and best practices for how to run effective meetings. And I found these 4 points which I thought were relatively instructive and somewhat new to me, but I think will be helpful for local boards as well too. Agenda items may include, and you may want to sort of schedule or categorize your agenda items within these sort of topics, for lack of a better word. 1, action items on which the board is expected to reach a decision during the meeting. You're going to adopt policy, you're going to adopt the budget, you're going to, you know, basically whatever you need a motion, you know, direct your superintendent to do something, things of that nature. Consent items, addressing routine matters such as minutes and monthly expenses can be approved together without discussion. I just noticed that, you know, you had the minutes and you reviewed the manifest here. The consent agenda, generally, obviously reviewing the manifest, there may be questions and things want to be pulled out from that, and particular questions directed either to the superintendent or for general discussion. But the consent agenda are generally for things that are what I'll call quote-unquote non-controversial, where you just need some tacit approval by the board. You may list approval of the minutes. Some boards I've seen put review the manifest or the monthly expenses on that, where the board chair will say, we pass this around, are there any questions or changes that need to be discussed on this? Seeing none, the minutes are approved by general consent. I think it helps the minutes, obviously. You don't necessarily need a motion to approve minutes. There's nothing in parliamentary rules of procedure that require that. The flip side of that, which is going to be with maybe a running theme throughout our entire discussion tonight, if some of the practices that you have in place in terms of calling for a motion and a second and review of the minutes work for you and everybody's comfortable with that, that's fine as well too. Remember, these are generally what are recommended as best practices in a broad sense. That doesn't mean that they're going to be the best practice in each local school district, in every district across New Hampshire, for every school board across New Hampshire. Ideas and thoughts for you to consider as you're looking through making the meetings run a little more effectively. Fair enough? Okay. 3, discussion items that require comment but do not require action. I think the budget is a good example. You may have budget workshops where you're going through and you're commenting, you're asking questions, you're referring things back to your superintendent, but no action is going to be taken. You're not going to be approving the budget tonight, but you may have set aside an hour at your meeting to discuss the budget and review the budget. That's another heading under which particular items can go under. Another good example is a first reading of a policy. I don't know how you do your policy work here, but I know most boards generally do an initial read. They'll go back to the superintendent or contact me or the district's attorney to revise, review, ask questions, and they'll come back for a second read. Maybe that first reading can go under that topic, discussions that require comment, but no action is going to be taken on that. And last, information that requires no action or discussion. Those are general reports. The playground committee's offering a report. The superintendent's reporting to you on something you asked him to investigate at last month's meeting, where you got, the Boy Scouts are going to give a presentation, things along those lines. Questions about that? Page 5, B3 talks a little bit more about the consent agenda. The first paragraph in the middle there, generally consent agenda items include only non-controversial items such as adoption of minute, receipt of reports, general information and items that don't require specific board discussion or board action. The consent agenda allows for all reports to be received within one motion. Presumably you've gotten the reports ahead of time in your board packet if you're receiving 2 or 3 of those. Hopefully you've read them before the meeting. If, specific discussion needs to be had about them, or specific questions need to be asked, or the report needs to be sent back, then maybe you can be pulled from the consent agenda. But generally, in your packet is the report from the playground committee. Are there any questions? Seeing none? Okay. You can move on to the next topic. New business. Moving on to page 6. This is always an interesting subject and topic, and I've seen it handled differently in school board meetings across the state. So I'm going to try and give some general advice as to what, again, NHSBA thinks are the best practices relative to new business. The reminder, the bold, and the first bold on this page, as discussed above, the school board's primary roles and responsibilities are listed back on page 2. The new business listed on the agenda should generally relate to these board functions. Your agenda may want to include an anticipated action for each item. For example, 1, Finance Committee report, brief questions and answers, no action needed. If you put that on your agenda, it may clarify for the board the extent to which conversation needs to be had and what the board's purpose is for having it on the agenda. You're just receiving the report. No action needs to be taken on this report. You can discuss it if you want, that's fine. 2, volunteer recruitment of philosophy, anticipated action, form committee of 3 or 4 board members. So that may require board action. If you put that on your agenda, that specific board action is needed on this, I think it will clarify for the board, it will help you manage your time within the context of the meeting, and it will give the public an understanding as well, too, of what action the board's going to be taking in any given meeting. 3, public policy committee, anticipated action, approve organizational statement to, that should say town council or what on zone changes. You can see I lifted this. Sure, Steve?
Just before you move on,
Yeah.
There's been some discussion on forming committees
Okay,
of more than 2 board members.
okay.
Can you have a committee of the board with a quorum of the board on it?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Falls into the right to know law. the issue is with 5 board members, right? If you have a committee that has, say, 3 board members, is that a quorum of the full board such that it needs to be posted and noticed as a full board meeting? Or is it sort of say you've got 3 board members and an administrator, 2 teachers, 3 or 4 members of the public, is it a committee meeting? The right to know law really isn't clear, other than if we look at the definition of a meeting under RSA 91A2, the definition of a meeting is the gathering of a quorum of the public body, or in this case, the school board, for the purpose of acting or discussing official school board business. If you have a quorum of school board members serving on a committee, in my opinion, that constitutes a quorum of the school board, such that it should probably be noticed as a school board meeting. I know other boards have done it a little bit differently, and other attorneys may have a different opinion on that. I think the safest way to proceed is to keep all your committees of having less than a quorum of school board members on the committee, and then only post it as a committee meeting. That would be my best recommendation.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any follow-up questions on that? The good thing about these questions is we see how we're talking about sort of board meetings, and the tough things for boards is the 2 questions that have been asked relate to right to know law and superintendent evaluations. While they relate to the agenda, you get a myriad of issues that play into this. So indeed, it's confusing at times, and it's not always clear. So if there are other questions that are, tangentially related by any means, ask away. That's what I'm here for. Talked about 3, 4, review and adoption of policies A, B, C, and X, Y, Z. So that may require specific board action. Reminder, I think this is important as well too, because I've seen boards have difficulty at meetings and run into roadblocks at meetings with this last bold portion here. Keeping with the concept that no surprises should come to light at a board meeting, new business is not the place for board members to surprise the rest of the board and administration with previously unannounced agenda items or topics. I've seen boards run into that concern where the chair will say, new business, is there any new business? And Joe board member raises his hand and says, I want to raise the issue about X. Nobody had notice about it. The superintendent's not prepared to discuss it. The public didn't know it was going to be discussed. That's not the place for new business. New business is what new items is the board going to be discussing that is new for that meeting or new for that topic or new items for the board to take action on. It's not sort of a free-for-all discussion. We have policies and process in place for getting that topic on the agenda. There may be circumstances in when it's appropriate. At 4 o'clock that afternoon, something happens, right? The boiler blows up, or there was a significant safety issue that the superintendent needs to bring to your issue. Emergencies, extenuating circumstances, that's one thing. But it's not the place to surprise board members with topics that nobody's had a reasonable opportunity to either be informed about or know that they're going to be put on the agenda, or the public didn't know was going to be put on the agenda for discussion.
So that would, that would exclude old business.
I've seen boards do it a couple of different ways. Yeah, sometimes they'll put old business carryover stuff from last meeting that either they ran out of time or they wanted to send it back to the superintendent to get a report, or you said, you know what, we're not sure, let's call Barrett and get an idea and opinion before we. I think either way, I think that can be under old business. If the board needs to take action on it, that's fine. New business generally, I think, is something that is not carried over from a previous meeting.
So anything previously unannounced.
You're right, correct. Any other questions on that? We clear on that? Yeah. Let's move on to page 7. Sticking to the business of the agenda. This falls on the board chair. It's not an easy position. It's not always a desirable position. But sometimes if the meetings are not running as smoothly, sticking to the agenda is generally the responsibility of the board chair. So, couple of tidbits and points here. Focus, stick to the agenda. This is the middle of page 7 again. Stay focused on the desired outcomes that we talked about by using an agenda. What is the desired outcome? Do we need to name people to this committee? Do we need to adopt these 3 policies? Do we need to get through the budget tonight? Do we need to take action on these 3 or 4 things or receive these reports? That's the desired outcomes that we talked about on the first couple pages. Have an endpoint. To avoid unproductive tangents or circular discussions, establish an end time in advance. I put that in there. I go back and forth on that. I mean, if you have work to get done, you have work to get done. But, you know, staying late, you know, till 11 o'clock or midnight hopefully is the exception and not the rule. I've seen some boards put general timelines. You know, this agenda item should take 10 minutes. This agenda item should take a half hour. I don't know if I necessarily recommend that. You know, I just, if it helps you get through the agenda, maybe. But, you know, things come up where, you know, we thought this was going to take a half hour, but we're an hour into it. What it can do, though, if you put maybe an estimated time, it can maybe help keep people on track so the conversation doesn't go circular. It's not my favorite practice. I've seen some boards do it effectively, and I've seen other boards try it, and they don't stick to it. So I don't really have a clear recommendation on it. Preempt debate. This gets back to the general consent, unanimous consent. Resolve non-controversial items through that manner. The board chair asks if there is any objection to closing discussion on a particular topic. If no one objects, debate is closed and we move on to the next item. If a member objects, the board can resolve the matter with a motion or a vote. Otherwise, use general consent to adopt reports, motions, approve minutes, and end debate. Start on time and stay on task. I'll let you read through that. And organize the meeting to minimize disruption and delay. Getting back to setting the agenda. Consent items first, maybe, so we can deal with those in sort of one fell swoop. Receive reports, maybe is your second item of business, so you know, you can just receive those. You're not leaving the budget committee or the finance committee or whatnot till 11 o'clock while you get through the rest of your business. And then move on to, you know, your action items, presumably at as you move on down the agenda. Page 9, 10, and 11 deal with addressing public comments. I'm gonna, just in the purpose, you know, for our own expediencies and getting through this, unless there are any specific questions about public comments and rules of engagement, I'm gonna skip over that. You can read through that. I will say that it's usually handled by policy. You probably have a policy that addresses public comments at board meetings. You know, each person gets 3 minutes, or I've seen some boards limit public comments to agenda items. Other boards have sort of a open forum, if you will, where members can come and speak to whatever topic is on their mind. Obviously, you know, they can't be obscene or libelous or things of that nature. So check your local policy and see what that says. Those are good. That's where the rules of engagement are going to be established. NHSBA has a sample policy on that. If you want to see it, get in touch with me, let me know, and I'll send it up to you. The board can review it. Michael?
A question on the public comment. If the practice does not reflect the policy, how do you address that?
Sure. As always, stick to your policy to the extent possible. If the policy is not reflective of the practice and the board desires to allow the practice to sort of rule the day or take precedent, then change the policy. You know, there are policies out there on public comments that run the gamut from free open discussion to very restrictive, everybody gets 2 minutes, agenda items only, you have to contact the board and get approval beforehand, you know, before you're allowed to come and speak. I don't necessarily recommend anything that restrictive, but the range and breadth with which policies can be developed to address that are all over the place. So if the NHSBA sample policy is not in line with what you want, and you need policy help with that, contact me, and I'm happy to work with the board to develop a policy that reflects the practice that the board wants to see in place. And another point on that, if policy is not going to reflect the practice, try and make sure that the practice is at least implemented equally and fairly for everybody, which is one of the reasons you kind of want to have a policy in place. You know, the first person gets up and gets 15 minutes and rambles on and goes on and gets engaged in a back and forth discussion with the board, and then the next person only gets 2 minutes and feels like they're cut off, that's problematic for the board, right? But if you have your policy and you can rely on that and you implement that, thank you, Mr. Smith, but your 3 minutes are up. If you have further comments, please contact the board chair, the superintendent, or send an email or whatnot. But make sure it's implemented fairly and equally among all members of the public. Right?
If we have a policy that is there designed to protect taxpayers and kids and stuff like that, but it's normally a practice that we don't necessarily go by the policy, how do we address that? I mean, there's
Can you give me an example?
competitive bidding process.
Okay,
If we seek 3 competitive bids and we only get 2,
right.
do we ignore the policy and
Yeah.
accept the 2, or do we
Yeah.
ask for it to go back out to bid to try to
Sure.
maintain that policy?
You know, your policy on bidding may have a, for lack of a better word, a waiver at the end where, you know, it says,
When
the
feasible.
board may from time to time waive this policy in the event.
When feasible.
Pardon me?
The wording is when feasible.
Yeah, right, when feasible. And, you know, I don't want to try and define that, but presumably when feasible would be left up to the majority and will of the board.
Thank you.
Yep. Parliamentary procedure, page 12. Try and finish up in about 3, 4, 5 minutes if that works. Basic provisions of parliamentary procedure. Each motion may only deal with one issue or idea. I've seen boards get into problems with that. A motion will be made, there's discussion, somebody tries to amend a motion, revise a motion, make a subset to that motion. Deal with one motion at a time. If the conversation changes what's going on or the nature of the conversation such that the original motion is no longer valid or moot or wants to be amended, have whoever made that motion to simply state, I withdraw my motion, and then somebody else restate it. It's, the person taking minutes is they're gonna thank you, gonna send you a big Christmas card, right? Because when you get into those sub-motions and secondary motions, it's very confusing, makes the minutes difficult to read, and you wanna make sure that everybody's clear on what's being voted on. Number 2, I put a question mark by this in my own notes. Debate should follow, not precede a motion. I've seen boards do it differently, and let me give you the 2 scenarios. The first scenario will be, all right, you know, adoption of policy XYZ. Is there a motion? I move that we adopt policy XYZ. Is there a second? Second the motion. Debate and discussion. And then you have 20 minutes of debate and discussion on policy XYZ, such that the nature of the policy may change, the desire and will of the board may change, and then you get back into that first issue that I talked about. You're no longer going to adopt the policy, you're going to send it back to your superintendent review or contact me for a review. So you've got this motion kind of hanging out there. I've seen boards do it, a lot of boards do it that way. It seems to me to make sense where the topic would be discussion of policy XYZ, possible adoption. That's how it's listed on your agenda. Here's policy XYZ, do any board members have questions on it? I think we should change paragraph 1, I think we should amend this sentence. We're all in agreement on the language? Yes, general consent, everybody's nodding. Is there a motion to adopt policy XYZ as amended? Second, vote, done. That, to me, that seems like an easier process. I've seen boards do it both ways. I don't know, I mean, if the process is working for you and you do it the first way I mentioned, again, don't let me come in and change what may be working for you. But from a practical standpoint, it seems to be that you want to have your discussion first and then kind of get into dealing with the motion aspect. Debate must be limited to the motion at hand.
Barrett,
Yeah,
question
sorry.
on that. So we have standing subcommittees. We have a standing policy subcommittee to
Yeah.
vet any proposed policy or amendment to a policy,
Yeah.
and then the subcommittee makes a recommendation to the full board.
Yep.
So would you recommend still putting that discussion piece, or if it's already been vetted through a subcommittee?
Yeah, that's there's a related question there?
It is very much related. Is it the policy subcommittee's duty or job to decide what policies to address, or is it the full school board that
Right.
has the conversation, and let's look at these policies to
Um,
work on.
Different boards handle it differently in each district. To a degree, that's up to the board itself. A lot of the boards I deal with, in the policy realm, I only deal with the policy committee. The board has said policy committee, and sometimes there's a board member on it, or a staff member has been designated as the NHSBA contact. Other boards that I deal with, it's, the board is dealing with the policies. Because it's a committee, you can set up the rules of engagement. You can give a specific charge to this policy, or to this committee, excuse me, where it says that the policy committee shall be responsible for reviewing all NHSBA updates and bringing forth recommendations to the full board. You may say the policy committee's charge is to address policies when so designated and when given to by the full board. How do you handle it now? What's the practice now?
Seems like
And I'll get
whatever,
back to your question in a second.
Okay.
seems like whatever issue is important to the policy committee is the policy that's addressed.
Gotcha. Let me answer Michael's question. You asked, is the board dealing with a recommendation, or are they re-debating the issue? Ideally, if the charge to the policy committee is to bring forth recommended policy language to the board, obviously the board wants to review that, it's your policy. But the flip side of that is, that's the reason you have committees, is to make recommendations to the board and to bring forth their recommendations and to save you guys a lot of work. What I hate to see done with committees is that the full board basically redo the work that the committee just spent hours or days or weeks or months doing. That's not the point of the committee. The point of the committee is to do that work for the board. And I understand you want to have as much background, and information, and sometimes you may feel as though you don't have the full background to make an informed choice. At that point, you kind of got to trust the committee. You got to just sort of trust that the committee did a good job and is bringing forth a recommendation for the issue. Back to your question.
Wouldn't it be cleaner if there was a process that was directed by the board?
Yeah.
Because if there is no process directed by the board, then you basically have, one individual policy, possibly directing it's the policy of the board,
Absolutely.
not the policy of one individual.
Certainly. And, if the board wants to establish a process that it puts into its policy development, or its policy development policy, there's actually a policy on policy development. Talk about redundancies, but, putting in a process as to, who's gonna be on the committee, how many members, what the charge to, that's when it's the charge to the committee. By all means, that's, if that's what the board wants to do to make this process cleaner, so what's coming forward and how the policies are gonna get to the committee, to the board, and what they're gonna look over, that's fine as well too. And certainly, Steve, as anybody that's been to our training, what do I always say is the board's primary responsibility? Policy. You need to own the policy. And the manner, again, which that takes shapes, be it committee or the full board, that's fine. However this board wants to choose. But yeah, the board, needs to have a hand in those policies. Did I get to your question, Mike? Did I answer that all right?
Thank you.
I'm trying to get through this. I know you've got a full agenda. Jumping to page 13, abstaining from votes. Has that ever come up? Has that ever been an issue, abstaining from votes? Let me just touch on this real quickly. An abstention is not a vote, all right? If somebody abstains from voting, it's not a vote. Therefore, it's not counted in the tally. Well, let me give you an example. 5 board members, 1 person abstains. So you've got 4. 4 votes are being cast. 4 votes are being tallied. A majority is still 3, right? Because if you had 4 members voting, 2 yay, 2 nay, you don't have a majority, it doesn't pass. Let's say you had 2 school board members abstaining. What's your majority then? Drops down to 3 votes being cast, right? Right? So the majority then is 2. And let me tell you about an example in a scenario where this happened. There was a school board that had a vacancy on the board. Okay, so there were 4 board members. There was a particular issue at hand that they had voted on, 2-2 didn't pass. Voted on again, 2-2 didn't pass. Voted on again, 2-2 didn't pass. The same issue came up, but with a couple of variances such that one board member felt he had a conflict of interest and couldn't vote unprejudicedly, so he abstained. He had been voting against the previous motions, so he abstained. So only 3 votes were cast, 2 yay, 1 nay. That motion carried. So they were down a member, they had somebody abstained. It affected, you had 2 votes carrying the day. So just be mindful when you're tallying your votes. Last point on abstentions. I feel they should be used very rarely and only in circumstances when there's a conflict of interest or you feel you can't vote without prejudice or bias on the issue. If you feel that you don't have enough information to make an informed vote, then vote nay. Because there's a motion on the floor, right? Should we have passed policy XYZ? I'm not sure, I think we should send it back, I don't know, I think I need more information. Well, the policy, or the motion is to direct action, right? Direct action. If you can't support the action that's being proposed, then vote no on it. I think that's the safest action.
So if I had a situation in front of me, I felt as though that one direction would affect me personally and financially,
Yep.
I should, with all good conscience, abstain from the issue.
There's nothing in law that requires you to abstain. Your fellow board members can't make you abstain from a vote. It's the individual board member's own decision. But I always say, when in doubt, if you're not sure, do I have a conflict here? The best practice, at least in the eyes of the public, is going to be abstaining from voting. That's my personal recommendation.
In the eyes of the public, is it all about appearances?
You're politicians, right? It's not all about appearances, but you've got a public that you need to get, the board needs to get public support on certain actions, right? If they think that people are doing things that, if they think that you're voting this time and you have a conflict of interest, and next vote you have a conflict of interest, but you're voting, you lose credibility with the public. And I don't mean to say that it's all about appearances, but it's, you gotta be accountable to the public, and the board needs to, project, a semblance of, not to say anybody's dishonest, but honesty and upworthiness and things of that nature. Questions, comments, first moving on? All right. Page 15, I'm gonna wrap this up, I promise. Role of the board chair. In the middle there, guide the following discussions at meetings. Do not take sides. That doesn't mean you can't vote on the issue, but when you're chairing the meeting, right, and you've got a controversial topic on the agenda, you need to remain at least impartial to the extent possible when dealing with your fellow board members and dealing with members of the public. You can vote, you're certainly allowed to vote on the issue, and you're certainly allowed to, when it comes to your turn, express your opinions on that, but you at least need to appear to be fair and even to your fellow board members and the members of the public. 2, recognize all who have comments and questions. Keep the group on topic. I'll let you read through those. Look at number 15, or the alternate pro and con at the bottom there. I think that's a good tip as well, too. If you've got that controversial issue, does anybody wish to speak for the proposal? Bob. Does anybody wish to speak against the proposal? Mary. If you alternate back and forth, pro, con, I think that helps lend to that appearance of fairness. Just a good tip for all board chairs to use. And that's it. The last couple pages, the last 3 pages are a checklist the effective meeting checklist, for those of you that have attended the new school board member orientation that NHSBA hosts in Concord, and you got that book, Becoming a Better Board Member, this is taken from that. So I included it in the materials. Keep them with your, read through them, keep them with your meeting materials and in your board informational packet, and work through them and get to know them a little bit, and hopefully they'll help. I hope I did not overstay my welcome or talk too much or run on too long. Are there any remaining questions?
How do you have an effective school board meeting when you have board members who are making decisions outside of public meetings? And then not only requesting, but insisting from the superintendent to have a discussion with a quorum of the board outside of a public meeting on a, say, $200,000 contract. And then that, the superintendent finally gets it out there that, that would be an illegal meeting, that wouldn't be proper. So then you have a discussion, say, with two members off to the side, discussing a $200,000 contract, and there's issues with one of the contracts that have already been proposed, and now because people are concerned about how they look, they're going to vote for company ABC. And then continue to demand that an emergency meeting be held so that the steering of the bid can happen. How do you have an effective school board meeting when you have school board members doing such with other people? Because if it's all about how people look, and the people are concerned about their appearances, they're not representing the people. They're here to represent themselves, and that is not the way to handle business.
Sure. I mean, without speaking I'm going to try to keep my advice broad and general without speaking any specific instances or issues that may or may not be going on in Wakefield. The first point to your question, certainly board business can only happen at a duly called meeting. A meeting is defined as a quorum of the board discussing or acting upon official school board business. Right to know law is clear as day. You cannot engage in official board business or have a meeting unless it's properly noticed, duly called, things of that nature. There's also RSA 91-8:2-a that talks about communication outside a meeting. And it says communication outside a meeting, including but not limited to sequential electronic communications, I believe, shall not be used to violate the spirit and intent and purpose of their right to know law. The spirit, purpose, and intent of the right to know law is openness of government proceedings. So, to the extent that certain conversations may be being had outside of duly called meetings, certainly the board cannot take action on those. I would advise broadly and generally, not to this school board, but in the context of NHSBA recommendations, that votes not be taken outside of a duly called meeting. That issues not necessarily be discussed among the quorum of the board outside a meeting. If the board member needs information or has questions of the superintendent, that's one thing. But all contracts, motions, etc., has to take place at a duly called meeting.
So what happens if that's not happening? What happens if, in fact, board business is being conducted outside of a properly posted public meeting on a $200,000 contract?
Right.
And then, to me, that's the start of corruption.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you're willing to conduct board business on a $200,000 contract outside of a public meeting, that's where people's palms start getting greased, and I have an issue with that. So if that's happening, what does a school board member do to stop that practice?
Sure.
and address that practice.
Yeah, well, the right to know law, you know, has remedies in it. Right to know law, you know, allegations of violations of the right to know law are filed in, I believe it's Superior Court. If there's evidence of, you know, such issues taking place, I would recommend that they be, you know, addressed by the board. You know, either call myself or local board counsel for a full opinion, perhaps an investigation. I know that under the remedies for the right to know law, any action by a board that's taken outside of a duly called meeting can be invalidated by a court. I don't want to get into too many specifics on this without knowing the facts. If there are continuing concerns and issues about this, you know, I'm certainly happy to you know, discuss them perhaps in another forum or at another time when there's more meetings. But I mean, the right to know law talks about violations and remedies and having a process for addressing those. Fine.
Barrett, are you saying that board members don't have the right to communicate one-on-one?
No.
Like, if I get information, or if someone has information and they say, hey, I want you to know this is important, and I want you to have all the details before you weigh your option,
Right.
do you have the right to tell your other board members, or do they have the right to call me and say, hey, you need to know this?
Right. There's always a fine line with the right to know law between what constitutes communication about official board business and what is the sharing of information that may be beneficial to a board member conducting his or her duties and responsibilities within the context of boardmanship. You know, board members are, you know, you're human beings who live in the same town, you've got kids that go to school together, you're allowed to communicate, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know. One second, Steve. The difficult task with that is ascertaining and determining what is official school board business and what is business or information that may relate to the school, but is not necessarily school district business. Let me give you an example. Let's say the board was considering adopting a curriculum that was aligned with Common Core. This is just an example. I've seen this in other boards. And the board had a debate about it and a discussion about it, and at the next meeting, the board was planning on either adopting this curriculum or not adopting this curriculum. You know, as a school board member, you know, say you run across an article in a newspaper or a magazine about Common Core curriculum and how it affects school boards. I think you can share that with your fellow board members without running afoul of the right to know law. Here's an article I found that may be helpful for, you know, for our discussion or communication.
In that purpose, say you have information and there's 3 of you standing there, are you not supposed to share the information?
I mean, these are,
If you're not making a vote, it's just you need to know this information.
Yeah.
Is that a negative too?
I don't, take a look at RSA 91-A:2-a. I don't know, I don't have the language right in front of me. That discusses communications outside of meetings.
Mhm.
And I believe it talks about, there's language in there about provided no votes are taken, but I don't want to comment specifically without having a chance to double check what that particular statute says. Did you have a follow-up, Steve?
Yes. What happens when you have one board member and they're only calling one board member at a time?
Yeah.
And then they talk to Sally, and then they get off the phone with Sally, then they talk to Bob about what they just talked to Sally about.
Right.
And then they get off the phone with Bob, and then they call John, and then they've all members of the, or a quorum
Yeah.
of the members of the board have discussed and have made a decision. But they're only talking about, you know, between 2 at a time. But they've basically done a quorum
Yeah.
on the same topic and come to a decision.
Right. The issue would be, in that scenario, would be whether or not the person originating the emails or the phone calls is doing so with the intent to to follow the right to know law. There's a case similar to that out of Oyster River about 3 years ago, where the board chair was doing just that for the purpose of avoiding the right to know law. He'd email Bob, then he'd email Sally, then he'd email Mary, then he'd email Joe. In that situation, I don't want to equate that situation with this discussion, because it was clear in that scenario that it was happening for the primary purpose of trying to avoid the quorum issue and get around the right to know law. The court in that situation didn't buy the argument that because it was less than a quorum each time. The other aspect to that, though, too, was that when the board reconvened after these individual emails were sent out, the board then took action about what had been discussed and what had been talked about. If the board would like, in the interest of time and moving on with your agenda, if you would like me to come up and discuss the right to know law at another time, I'm happy to do that at the board's pleasure. If we want to get into a full right to know law conversation, I'm happy to do that as well, too.
Great.
Are there any last remaining questions about, Ralph?
Is it safe to say that all boards should strive to create and reinforce trusting relationships with other board members based on mutual respect, integrity, and honesty?
Sounds like a good practice to me.
Is there a policy that is in place regarding that?
We might have a board ethics policy, BCA, that talks about sort of general respect and things of that nature. I know we have a policy on board ethics, the content of which I think touches on that in a broad sense. As specific exact language, I don't know offhand. Anything else I can help the board with? Thank you very much for having me up. I hope it was helpful. Thank you for your continued membership in NHSBA. If there's any follow-up or any remaining questions after I leave, please get in touch with either your board chair or Michael and contact me. Again, if you want me to come up and do further additional training on right to know law, superintendent evaluations, whatever topic the board would like me to hear, like to hear me talk about, I'm happy to come up at any time. Happy holidays, and thank you again for having me. Thanks for being
Thanks,
here.
Barry.
Merry Christmas.
Thank you.
Cafe services, Michael?
We have representatives from Cafe Services here this evening to give a update. These doors are open.
For those of you who don't know me, I'm Kara Green. I'm the district manager for Cafe Services. This is Brian Jones. He's the food service director who oversees the Wakefield School District as well as Milton. And Chris Farrow, who's the director of Fresh Picks. So, just briefly, the current state of the department, I think, is doing very well. We have a new staff that are all brand new staff, obviously, in the kitchen. And they're working very well together. Brian and Kim Novotny is the lead here in the kitchen, and she seems to be doing a really good job this year. She's doing a really good job with offering some more additional variety to the children. She's created a really good relationship with most of the staff here. I've seen a big turnaround with employees. We have some letters from the staff expressing their thanks for paying attention to their needs as well as the students. So that's great. We've done a couple of promotions. We did a pasta station, a cook-to-order pasta station, which the kids and staff really loved. We'll be doing an additional a stir-fry station in February. And then we're going to do some sticker tray promo, which sticker goes on the tray, and the kid who gets the sticker gets a little treat for the day. The kids seem to really like that, as well as a Super Bowl promotion. We're also looking at trying to do a Grandparents' Day. I know that we've done that in the past, so we're hoping to do that maybe in February. And that's it for now for promos. As far as a la carte items, we'd like to, in January, start trying to offer some additional a la carte items to the middle school students. So additional items that they enjoy, like chicken burgers and maybe pizza, an additional day on the week that they can have on top of hot lunch, the deli station, the salads, the parfaits. So it just gives them a little additional variety, as well as offering some additional healthy snacks and beverages. So bottled water and like the fruit waters that are approved by the state, and healthy snacks like reduced fat, snack mixes and such. So we'd like to start offering those in January. We'll come up with a flyer that will go out to the parents with the students so that they know what's available and the pricing, that they know that those are addition to the regular meal price. As far as meal counts, I did a quick comparison to see where we stood last year comparative to this year, and overall every month the counts have gone up, not drastic, but we have seen some increases, and I'd be happy to share those now or at a later time. Okay. Negative balances right now. Currently, the negative balance is at $2,200. That went down by $400 alone today.
Yeah.
So we've been sending the weekly letters out and then making some phone calls. I know Jerry has been making phone calls. And then we, the SAU sent the additional letter out this week to some of the very high balances. So we did receive some of those payments today. And lots of phone calls of people concerned about
Quite a
them.
few phone calls, which is good because I wasn't receiving any phone calls before on negative balance letters. So I think the new letter is starting to help with that.
Yep.
Would you just confirm with me that it would never be a practice for one of the adults to go into the cafeteria and directly speak with a child and say, you owe this amount of money? One of your staff would not do that, would you?
Go to a student.
Mm-hmm. In front of other students and say, you owe this amount of money. You wouldn't, that wouldn't be a policy you would.
And we follow what the school's policies
Mhm.
are, so if that is the school's policy that we're not allowed to speak to students, then that was what we would follow. But some schools allow us to, in the line, say to a student,
But in this school district, as far as I know, it's not going, I don't know if it's specifically addressed in your policy or not.
yeah.
No one's approaching students and saying, you owe this amount of money.
Okay, that's a complaint I had this week. So
Okay.
I had a complaint that someone went up to a table and the only reason I'm saying this now is because I just heard it today, and that in front of his friends were like, you owe $60, bring it in. And I was like, that's very unprofessional, and I would hope that that would not be how we're handling the collections.
No.
Because the children
We
should
can
really
look
be
into
talking
that.
to the parents, not to the child.
Yep, and we can look into that
If you would.
particular instance, but no, that's not a practice that
Okay.
would happen on a regular basis.
That's all I had to report today.
Do we give them an alternate lunch if they're behind in their, if they have a negative balance?
That's not what the
Okay.
policy, the
All right.
procedure says. yeah.
Couple years ago.
It still says it, yeah. I think as of the other day it did, so.
The policy?
That's why I was checking.
The letters
So-
that went out
Oh.
Yeah.
still says that we give them an alternate lunch
alternate
when we
lunch.
don't.
So if
Can we
somebody could check
the
that.
Yeah.
Sure,
wording on that?
absolutely.
Absolutely.
That's all I have.
Right. Kara, could you just clarify the, basically how à la carte is above and beyond the meal.
Yes.
So when people run into negative balances, let's say if they have applied for free and reduced and they've been granted free and reduced, anything above and beyond a reimbursable meal is not
Right.
reimbursed or does not apply.
Yeah, so for instance, an example would be snack milk. That's come up quite a few times. So if a student has a negative balance, they're not allowed to purchase any a la carte items, including snack milk. So for instance, here a list comes down of who the students that are ordering snack milk. If they have a negative balance, then we do not send a snack milk for that student for the day.
We're gonna have to look into
Yeah,
that.
That's,
What's-
yeah.
Yeah.
What's the definition of snack milk? Is
Uh,
that different from an ordinary milk, or?
No, it's the same milk, it's just, it's not part of a reimbursable meal.
It's a milk served by itself at snack time rather than a milk with a meal at a breakfast or lunch. And right now, your policy does
Say.
state
No
that
a la
anybody
carte.
with a negative balance doesn't get any a la carte items.
I don't know if I knew that snack milk was part of à la carte, and so that would be something
Yeah, I know snack milk is.
I
Yeah,
would want to.
anything outside of that
Okay,
full meal as defined by the USDA at breakfast or lunch, anything outside of that would be considered a la carte.
okay.
All set, guys?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Nice to see you all.
Thanks.
Hey, Ralph.
Madam Chair, out of respect for the folks that are sitting here patiently waiting, I'd like to, on the agenda, take out of order 7A and
Certainly,
have 7B first, if that's all right.
we can do that.
Well, might want to ask the other board members if that's okay.
You guys mind flipping those two items?
Which ones?
Under 7, old business, the A and B, just flip-flop them. I'd like to flip them, if I may, being the flipper that I
Go
am.
right ahead, Flounder.
Old business, we're gonna discuss the bus route request from St. John's. Michael, we asked you for some information, some clarification on a number of different items. Do you have that?
I do have some additional information for you this evening. I looked into what it would take to basically provide one of our spare buses to the daycare center for their use. And what that would entail is that we'd have to re-register the spare bus to put on more of a residential plate compared to a government plate, which means that would impact our insurance rates. There's a minor cost for the transfer of plate from a government plate to a residential plate. However, there would be an impact on our insurance rates if we were to do that. There was also discussion around hiring a part-time bus driver to drive that spare bus. And talking with Mr. Eldridge, you're looking at basically 2 hours a day that you would need a bus driver. And that comes out, if we were to do that for the remainder of the year at 2 hours a day and put that right in the middle of the step scale for bus drivers would be an additional $3,200 for that. And if we were looking at for full year next year, that would be close to $5,400 to hire a part-time driver to drive that spare bus. So that's the information I have around providing the spare bus and a driver. As for looking at the run itself, I asked Mr. Eldridge to do a dry run, so we weren't just sort of basing the concept on an estimate. I asked him to actually get in a bus and drive it in the morning and see what that run would take to see if you could get the kids here on time so they could eat breakfast. So I didn't want to go off the estimate. I wanted to actually have the run taken so we could base a decision off of that as well. And he did do the run, and he mentioned that he would be able to get the students here at 8:24 in the morning. So that gives them about 6 minutes to eat breakfast. And again, that's not pending. That's pending, good weather, no traffic. So we could get the students here in time prior to 8:30, and the time you said would drop off would be 8:24. The only thing that you would have to do in order to do that is shift one street would have to be shifted to another bus. and that other bus would have to leave 5 minutes earlier to start their run in order to get all the kids to school on time. So that's the information I have this evening. So it went down from having to shift up 3 routes to you'd have to shift basically one street to another route, start that 5 minutes earlier, and if we were to just continue that current union run, you'd be able to get the students to school on time for breakfast, pending any weather, bad weather, or traffic. So that's what I have for you this evening for additional information that was requested.
Steve?
That number, that you gave us last time, did that include all maintenance and wear and tear on the vehicle, that type of thing? Is it?
No, I believe it was just the increased hours for the driver, increased time for the driver.
These are all Wakefield children, right?
Every one of them.
Steve?
I have a question, but no one on the board can answer it, so I don't know if it's, appropriate to, but, I did see, online something, is it the pastor or the minister of the church, and there was some discussion about whether the daycare was in fact a 501c3 or it wasn't?
I didn't see anything.
You didn't see it?
I didn't see anything.
It is a 503. It is under the umbrella of the church, so it is a nonprofit daycare.
Is it a registered 501c3?
Yes.
I operate under the church.
Bonnie?
Will you be operating under the church when you relocate?
Temporarily.
Because in that letter I saw, there was, apparently, is it the pastor or the minister said that the daycare was not a 501c3.
It is. There's
I have
documentation we
paperwork.
can bring in.
But is it listed as the church, and then,
I'm paid from the Episcopal Church of St. John the Baptist.
right, but is the 501, I believe all churches are 501c3s, but is the church administering the daycare, or is the, well, I guess,
We're a mission of the church. Does that,
An answer to a board of directors.
which the priest is part of? Does that, they also have the thrift shop. They're the same thing.
but that's under the church, the thrift shops,
And so
of
are
course.
we.
Well, right, but you're within you're within the confines of the building of the church, which the church itself is under the 501c3, but is the daycare a separate entity
No.
No,
legally from the church?
No.
no.
It is called St. John's Community Day School. It is an entity of the church.
Our payroll is the Episcopal Church of St. John the Baptist. Our New Hampshire state license, just for licensing purpose, is St. John's Community Day School.
Would it be possible, could you get that letter from the pastor or minister or the?
Which letter? The one that shows documentation of the 501?
Well, apparently there was a discussion.
Are you talking about the bidding bell that's right online through the St. John's Church? It's just a bidding bell. She sent out she put it's not even a letter, it's an email to all the parishioners and the public
No, this was I guess it was a letter from your pastor of the church, and I guess there was meetings held over at the church about this particular issue.
Yeah, I think you're talking about the bidding bell.
And there was, within this letter that I saw, there was questions as, well, basically what it came down through after discussion, there was multiple meetings with the parents, but there was, it was clear from what I saw that the pastor was saying that the daycare is not part of the church's 501c3.
No, we are. I don't think you got that from the pastor. I think maybe you got that from comments written that were uneducated and not
No,
informed.
this looked like it was right from the pastor.
Steve, what is it?
What is it?
Where are you going with it? I guess I don't understand.
Well, I don't know, I mean, you want to try to, help people out as much as you can, but if they're not a 501c3 and you're using other people's tax dollars to supplement a business, I think that creates a problem. If in fact it is a nonprofit, I think that would be okay, but if in fact it's a legitimate business like anybody else, I think you'd run into problems if someone ever questioned it as to using taxpayer money for a public business.
I get where he's going with that one.
I think either way.
Do you have a
Either way.
response? Do you have a response?
This is all just kind of, here, this isn't solid information. We are in fact a 503, we are in fact a nonprofit, okay? That's not debatable. That's a fact. The second fact is that every single one of us are tax-paying residents of this town, and this is a daycare in crisis. Every one of us are taxpayers. I pay just as much taxes as everybody else whose kids get picked up at Pine River Pond, which is on the opposite side of town. This is a temporary request brought to you by taxpayers, voting taxpayers of this town. Every one of us are.
Go ahead.
Excuse me. We can furnish paperwork to prove that we are under the St. John's Church and it is a 501c3. Will that clear up any concern that we have? Will that affect the voting is what I mean.
No.
We're happy to clarify and
That's just
provide any
one
paperwork
board member's
necessary.
question, so he's just asking a question to get clarification. That's what we do. And we understand you're all taxpayers, so.
I think it would help though. It may, could put some help, and if I may, but just to the taxpayer point, we have to kind of look at taxpayers as a whole, not as one specific group.
And I understand that. I understand where you're going with that, Steve. I totally understand. I guess the next question that I would have to ask is, it's going to cost $3,200 this year to cover mileage, salaries, the school bus, the transportation.
I thought the number was $1,000 the last time
We asked for clarification from the superintendent, and that's the numbers that Mr. Teresi has come back with.
Was it the $3,000 for a private driver and a private bus?
Go ahead.
That's if we were to
If we would
provide
do
a
the
spare
private,
bus and a
okay,
driver.
that's right.
If we were
But
to
it
use a
seems
current
feasible that
bus,
you
it
could
was.
just do the current route, like you said.
Okay,
get
and
here.
I guess my concern to that is, we're picking up children, and I have a really big concern here, because we're gonna be picking up children, and then we're gonna get other children to school with 6 minutes to have breakfast. That's pending any traffic accidents, delays, snowstorms. That's a huge concern from me and probably other parents out there. Is their child going to be late because we had to change the routes? Is their child not gonna get breakfast? How much of a delay is it gonna cause for these parents? And then the other route that now they have to be 5 minutes early. I guess we have to look at that's my concern. So we have to look at all of these things when we make this decision. Ralph?
Doesn't school start at 8:30?
Yes.
And the kids start eating breakfast after 8:30, right?
No.
Their classes at 8:30.
Buses empty out, they start coming in about 8:15. And so therefore, as soon as the buses get there, the kids go in the cafeteria to get breakfast, or they go straight to their classroom.
Okay, so 6 minutes is
So
an
some
accurate
students may have
estimation.
15 minutes.
All right. I was thinking if
Which is
school started at
Yeah.
8:30 and people start eating breakfast then the 6 minutes would be an extra 6 minutes, not.
No, that's,
Well,
that's
thanks for
what
clarifying.
that leaves it. Any other questions, guys? Comments? Anybody want to make a motion?
I'll move to ask the transportation director to set up the bus routes, accommodate the preschool.
Have a second? Motion fails for lack of a second.
They are our students. They may be young students, but they are our students.
I understand. Thank you, guys. Old business, civil engineering design, the RFP. We were going to discuss that tonight.
Looks better.
So
Looks
for me-
thinner.
Thanks,
I'd like for me
Ralph.
to speak to this, Madam Chair? Just
Please.
Before we start having a conversation. So I sent the full RFP to our district attorney and asked to review the full RFP and provide us the minimal legal language necessary for an RFP. And she had sent that back, and you see that the RFP has been cut in half, basically. Your total now is 7 pages, where the one prior was 14. So according to our attorney, this is the minimal language required in an RFP to cover the school board and the district.
Ralph?
All right. So if this is the minimal amount, and the old RFPs didn't ask for financial statements, and didn't ask to reserve the right to investigate any and all bidders, there's some language in here I still think is designed solely, the only intent of the language is to limit the competitive bidders. And I think the school board has the ability to, well, hopefully they have the ability to answer the question, why do we need financial statements? And why do we need to command that we'll take all notes and designs and drawings and memorandum and reports and technical data, designs, drawings, computer programs, including supporting data, which may be in cards, tapes, discs, drums. How do we feel that we have the right to command those tools of a trade, which somebody's paid for? All that does is it drives up the cost of the bid. And I don't see, I can't answer the question why we need it. If I could come up with an answer why we need it,
I'm not legal, but I can tell you why, in the past, I've asked for it while doing bids, is because I don't want to give somebody a $300,000 job and then have them go bankrupt after they've done quarter of the job. That's a huge, and again, I'm not legal, but I know that's why a lot of places ask for that stuff, is because they just want to make sure they're covered.
we're talking about $4,000 to $10,000, maybe $12,000 with a survey and an engineer's.
Well, and I understand
That's a
that. I
huge
understand that,
difference.
Ralph. But, I mean, legally, Mr. Tercey, is that what they're suggesting is what we keep in?
Again, this was the recommendation of our district attorney. Those questions I can't answer specifically. That would be something you want to ask the attorney.
And can anybody on the board, I mean, if it's a small number project, I see startup companies and people coming out of college with the ability to provide engineering services. Maybe not a portfolio that's a mile and a half long. To me, if we really want to stick to the policies and we really want to do right by the taxpayers in the school district, we want to encourage, not discourage, people from bidding on a project. And there's prohibitive language. I mean, just on page 3, part 5, where it starts out all notes, and I mean, that stuff.
And again, I'm just going to interject here because I know, again, when you're doing designs and you're doing a project like this, 9 times out of 10, they do the design, they put it on a CD or whatever, and they give it to you anyway. That's part of where I come from. That's part of what they do when they do this. So that's, again, that's pretty common in a lot of places.
Last sentence of part 5, it says, no information, report, etc., developed in connection with the RFP may be reproduced without the school district's prior written consent. So, say the guy's got a job next year at another place, that sentence to me says he can't utilize the information that he's given the Wakefield School District to present to another potential job without Wakefield School District's written consent. And what if Wakefield School District never responded? I mean, not that things get overlooked or forgotten, but it's just prohibitive. And
Steve?
I would hate to say this, but I kind of tend to agree with Mr. Fogg. I mean, it is too much personal information that, I'm sure some people in town probably wouldn't want to provide that. On the first page, I mean, there's withdrawal of any proposals. At this point, you're probably looking at a next summer project. Granted 90 days after the proposal due date may not necessarily affect an engineering the piece of it, but I think that would definitely apply to the actual removal of the dirt itself, because you're talking January, and 90 days after that is April. This person decides to pull out after 90 days. Now we're back behind the 8 ball again. Now we have to start over again, and then it'll be April. So we may not be able to get it done next summer if someone decides to pull out after April. So
this is just for the engineering services.
I know, I did say that. I do understand it being the engineer services, but, where we're not gonna be doing it till July 1, in April, and then this individual could pull out after April. And if the job isn't completed, then then we'll have to start all over. I mean, I do have to agree, I think some of the language just really doesn't allow for local companies to be able to put a bid in on it. It is far too restrictive.
Bob, you had a question?
Yeah, I just had to agree with Ralph that I think there's overabundance of issues in here that, to me, shouldn't be in here either.
Bonnie?
I guess when you said that Mr. Brown stated that it wasn't gonna start until July 1st, we have money still left that could get this done, right? And get the engineering done before July 1st, is that right?
Right.
Okay. I'm not a lawyer. If this was, I mean, and if this was, if you called and said, they want the skinny, they want all the baloney taken out, and what is our least restrictive, which is a great word, least restrictive way to send out an RFP, and this is what they gave back to you. I might not agree 100% with all the wording in it, but I don't have that degree to make a decision on what could get us in trouble and not in trouble.
Right.
I don't have a degree either, but we slimmed it from 14 pages to 7 by being a dummy and asking, you know, can we reduce some of the requirements? I mean,
Well-
Go ahead, Ralph, you finish.
Go ahead.
I would just, I had gone through it and made some notes, and I would offer some amendments to this so that we can forward it and get this without spending any more money on a lawyer. But
Fine.
Now, does this engineer have the right to pick what plan we're actually gonna do from the two that we have?
in this, it states that it will be utilizing the
Existing.
plan, the revised plan that was drawn up. So the final decision is the board's, whether or not it wants to amend the plan. But if it's going to amend the plan, I would think that it's going to let the engineer know what changes to the plan will be made prior to him doing his thing.
So, let me ask you, Ralph, so what if he feels that that plan needs to be modified?
I would encourage the board to take his recommendations.
Okay, so it can be modified, or even originally go back to the other plan?
It could go back to the original plan. I mean, I would seek the opportunity to explain to the potential engineer how this, in my mind, would have worked. You know, what defines a retention trench or an infiltration trench? What defines where the depth of it is located as far as setbacks on boundary lines and stuff like that? I mean, I would hope that because the school board adopted this plan, somebody from the school board has, along with the facilities director and the superintendent, has the opportunity to communicate with whatever competitive bidder is awarded the bid.
So does he look into if there's any wetland permits or anything like that from the town and stuff like that?
According to the RFP, that would be their duty.
Okay.
They would also be getting a survey.
Agency applications.
Bonnie?
Can we ask Mr. Fogg what are your recommendations? What do you think that are gonna hinder people wanting to bid?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's, the front page looked good. Second page looked good. Third page on the top, the continuation of the paragraph from the second page. I would just strike financial statements in between school district project and the on-site tour evaluation by school district personnel. References and other pertinent information, that should stay in there.
Where are you?
On, it would, page 14 of the packet, page 3 of the RFP, up at the very top.
The first paragraph?
Well, it's a continuation of page 2. Second line down. Semicolon, financial statements.
Yeah.
Can
I-
you just go through that and say what you feel we should strike out?
So I think we might disagree
Right,
on some of it.
Yeah, so I'm just gonna explain what if I was in full control here. This is what I would strike. I would strike that financial statements, and we're gonna discuss it and come to a decision. In that last sentence, it says, "The Wakefield School District also reserves the right to investigate any and all bidders to determine the bidder's ability to perform the services under the RFP." To me, if a guy's been in business for 5, 10, 15, 25 years, that's a pretty good start to his resume to begin with. And if he's willing to give you a lot of the other things that are in the other pages, what kind of expense is Wakefield School District willing to go through to investigate any and all bidders? I mean, that's an expense.
Bonnie?
I guess in any of the work that I've done, we always get financial statements, so I guess I don't have a problem with that. And I guess I'm wondering if that last sentence, Ralph, means that, that we can call and confirm that his engineering certificate is up to date and that, that's how I look. I don't think like a negative, like we're gonna investigate you for negativity. I look that we're gonna look and make sure that your certificate's up to date and that, you can legally give us this. Do you know what I mean? That's how I look at it.
That information's asked for prior to this.
I understand that, but sometimes,
To me, an investigation says cost.
well,
School district's gonna spend money looking at any and all bids to determine the bidder's ability to perform the services under the RFP. I mean, and I just hate to see the school district spending money unnecessarily. I mean, that's more of my concern for the tax dollars, that the school district may be, I mean, once you start spending money to investigate, it's not just gonna reappear somewhere. It's money spent. The investigation happens, oh yeah, Joe Go guy is ready and there's no problem, but here's my bill for $500. Thank you very much. I don't see what is the need to investigate somebody that's already providing all of the other information that's pertinent to the project?
Well, I guess that would be an attorney question then, because it's not something any of us can answer.
So the Wakefield School District's gonna spend more money anyway. Asking the attorney about
Well,
it.
obviously, because we don't know if it needs to be in there legally, Ralph.
But that's why we have the ability to discuss it and make decisions as a board.
Would you like my legal opinion?
Yes, I would, Mr. Burke.
Because that one sentence, and hopefully the board wouldn't waste the money, but within that specific sentence, it says reserves the right. Doesn't say shall. It says reserves the right. Therefore, allowing the board to conduct an investigation, I don't think that wasting taxpayer money on investigating bidders would be prudent, but it doesn't say that it has to be done under the RFP.
Blow my amendment out of the water.
Thank you very much. Anything else, Mr. Park?
Well, down at number 5, I mean, again, that's professional material that people gone to school and, I mean, they've earned this stuff. I don't know where the school board or a facilities director or superintendent or anybody else has paid their dues and should be awarded that information. And then if the bidder, the contractor, wants to use the work he created for the district, he has to get the district's permission. It's like, holy moly, you're gonna take all of this information that I've paid for and worked for, use it to anything that you wanna use it for, and then I have to ask your permission if I wanna use it for a subsequent project.
doesn't it just say on demand though? It doesn't say that we automatically want all that information, it says upon demand.
Well, I will tell you,
Upon demand.
honestly, a potential bidder reads these things and says, I'm really not interested in providing a bid. It's so overwhelming, I mean, it's like, how about my last 2 kids? I'll give you my first 2 kids, but what about my last 2?
See,
Yeah, page 4, I think you're gonna have problems with people, within the first paragraph. Delivered to the school district upon demand, and the school district shall have the right to use them for any purpose which it may deem desirable without the necessity of compensating the bidder or any other person or persons for their use.
that's problematic.
I think people are gonna probably say, well, wait a minute, if I get 95% completed, the school board could just say, okay, now we want your work product, and we're not paying.
I mean, it's just, to me, it's a deterrent, and we're not trying to keep people away from this bidding process.
So do we want to have Mr. Tercey take the amendments back to legal? Or do we want to take a chance and do it ourselves and have something bad happen?
I don't think we'd have anything bad happen, but I've been wrong before. There's a few other things, page 5 on this. It says buyer, Bob Adams. What is he buying? Isn't that
Where are you, Rob?
on page 5 of the same RFP? Why isn't that just say contact person? Because Bob's not spending a dime on this. What is he buying? And page 6, SAU number 64, down at the end of it. SAU number 64 will award the bid by February 25th. Why isn't that the Wakefield School Board? Why aren't we opening up the bids?
Bob?
It almost looks like a template.
It is
a
absolutely a
Boil.
Don't think outside the box. Here's your box, now conform.
Yep, so they're filling in the blanks.
Right, it is a template.
And it's a confusing, overbearing template. But it is 7 pages lighter. So it does, that's encouraging. That does show me that, a little scrutiny, we can streamline things. And if we can do it one time, we could probably do it a second time, but we can also spend more money on the attorney. And if the board chooses, I can be part of the minority, and you could put the RFP out just as it's written, if there was a motion in a second to that effect.
Steve?
Page 4, that last sentence is contradictory to withdrawal of any proposal, on page 1. Withdrawal of any proposal is prohibited for a period of 90 days, so therefore a bidder could withdraw his proposal after 90 days, but then it says prices will be firm for 6 months.
That's only 180 days.
Right, but they can withdraw it after 90. But then it's directing them that they must keep their prices firm for 6 months. Well, how do you have 6 months that they have to keep their price firm, but they can withdraw their proposal after 90 days? It's a contradiction.
And I do hate to spend more money with legal, but, if the board chooses to forward this RFP as written,
I guess the two that I see is number 5. I think that that's pretty, that's really in a tie-in.
Right.
And then I would think that making this a contact rather than a buyer would be.
Okay.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
So can we just get some clarification on what the amendments are, so I can make sure they're noted? All I have at this point is on page 3, striking financial statements. From that first, actually the remainder of the first paragraph. under terms and conditions?
No, I don't,
But I think consensus of this board would be not to strike either of those items.
Okay.
right.
And then I have on page 5, change buyer to contact.
Correct. And then,
That's all I have at this point.
and then on, this is 3? or-
Page 3,
Page 3,
part 5.
part 5, can we take that out of there?
Take the whole,
Yes.
all number 5 out?
All of number 5 out.
Is that by consensus?
Yeah. Steve, was there anything? Oh, and double check the 6 months.
Yeah, I would change either
You
one
can change
one to the other.
Either change 6 months or 90 days. We need one or the other.
I would like for you to tell me what you'd like. So,
Why don't we say 6 months on both?
Well, give
Stay
us more.
consistent, 6 months.
So what you're saying is that they have the right to withdraw for 180 days?
It's prohibited for a period of 180 days after the proposal due date.
Okay.
And then on that would allow.
And change price, I can't change the price.
Right, and
Okay.
the price is fixed.
And one other, the only other item I would like to see changed is on attachment A, page 6, the schedule. The middle one, it says SAU will award by February 25th. I really strongly feel as though the Wakefield School Board should be making the decision.
No. Absolutely.
So we do make the decision, don't we? And then they just award it? It
No,
comes
the board-
before us to decide on, correct?
The board awards it,
Okay.
the board
Or
awards
where does it say that we don't?
Right. It doesn't say that we
it.
don't.
It just says
It just- yeah.
SAU 64 will award.
Oh, okay.
Which, by black and white lettering, tells me that we don't even have to be part of the process. The SAU 64 can award it.
Okay, so you want it to say Wakefield School Board?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Other than those major changes, I don't see anything wrong with it.
okay, so now review those. So on page 1, under withdrawal of any proposals, I'm changing 90 days to 180 days. Page 2 as is. Page 3, I'm striking all of number 5, which also goes into page 4. On page 5, I'm changing buyer to contact. And on page 6, I'm changing under schedule SAU number 64 to Wakefield School Board. Is that all of them?
Can I just ask a question?
Yeah.
Do you think it would be, I guess the withdrawal of the proposals for 180 days for 6 months, do you think that maybe we should be taking the other one and making them both 3 months?
Well,
Because what if we like award the bid to them and they wait 6 months? And then at the end of the 6 months, they withdraw? I mean, 3 months
Well-
is a long time to wait already to have the service done.
I like the longer period of time in case we only get one bid, and
Only
then
on
the
our
next time
benefit.
around, it
Yeah,
only
good
comes in
benefit.
2 bids, and then
Okay.
we, you know.
All right, I just needed it explained why you wanted to do it that way rather than the other.
It explains that right on page 6, design complete to be bid by March 31st. So that takes care of that. Their work product is supposed to be completed and ready to go out to bid on March 31st.
Thank you for considering those changes.
You're welcome. All set, Mr. Tercey? You got everything?
I do.
Good. Anything else, guys? Okay, committee reports. Do you have any?
The policy meeting did not meet today.
Okay.
That was, they had an issue with you asking me to have Bob.
I know,
and, so-
okay.
Okay,
Okay.
so we'll wait and go over that at another time.
Okay. Administration,
Can we,
Oh,
committee reports?
go ahead, Steve.
Just as Barrett discussed, I believe that the policy committee needs to be directed by the board and not one board member. So I believe that the board needs to come up with a process on how policies will be handled by the policy committee, how they will be brought up, on what time frame. I think that there has to be a specific process, because it's the whole board that adopts the policy and is responsible for the policy. So we need to come up with a process directed by the board to the policy committee, and not the other way around as it is now.
Okay. Mr.
So-
Tercey, can we put that on for the next agenda, please?
Yep, I believe we currently have a policy development policy. As a matter of fact, just as Bear was saying, I could put that on the agenda for the
Please.
full board to discuss, to amend it.
That'd be great.
Okay.
Or reaffirm.
Yep.
Okay. All right, curriculum coordinators report.
Just a highlight really quickly what happened in this month. Quite a number of meetings were held, and I attended the local agency meeting for the SWIFT framework, and we had wonderful discussions on the technical assistance that SWIFT is going to be providing us. We do, I believe, I'll check with Mr. Tercey, but SWIFT is due for a presentation to the board in January. Correct? Okay. And I attended the SWIFT quarterly meeting along with members of the team here at Paul School, which had information on the change process, connecting with home and school, setting priorities, and school-wide culture. Krista McCullough conference was, again, another item that I attended. Learning progressions was a wonderful seminar there. Personalized learning. Also, various technologies that are in the future. Facilitated the mentor and mentee meeting. Gave out information on peer visits. That is a recommendation that both the mentor and the mentee visit each other at least once before March. So, did attend the accountability task force, which Smarter Balanced was gone over, PACE was gone over, the achievement level descriptors for Smarter Balanced was gone over. We will have access to the interim assessments and the digital library for Smarter Balance, which is a plus. In the beginning, we didn't know if the vendor could provide for that, so the vendor is going to be able to provide that to us. And then I came back and actually did a training on the Smarter Balance performance tasks with the staff. Any questions?
Well,
Is it possible for you to provide us with what's happening in Massachusetts now that they've adopted the Common Core standards? It seems as though they're losing some of the higher scores that they had in all of their education.
On the achievement level descriptors that came out from Smarter Balanced, Massachusetts is PARC, it's not Smarter Balanced, but I can give you some information as far as the achievement levels descriptors. The bar is reset, so the information regarding how students will score in the new bar is going to be different than what you have experienced before, because the bar's reset. It's really a baseline. This year coming up is a baseline year. The bar is completely reset.
So it's not just the idea that they adopted Common Core, now they're,
No, it's because it's been reset.
okay. All right.
But I can provide an article that might help clarify that for
That
you.
would be great for me. Or hopefully.
For the whole
Great.
board.
I'll call everybody.
The additional graph is just a graphic representation of where we are in the curriculum process, which is a little different than what I've given you before.
Keith?
SWIFT,
Mm-hmm.
School-Wide Integrated Framework for Transformation, that's transformation to Common Core, correct?
No,
It's not.
no, it's
Yes.
transformation to close the gap in student learning with some of our special groups of students, making sure that all students have equity education. That's what that transformation means. It means all means all.
Can you explain equity education?
That we want to ensure that the students in the subgroups that were disaggregated for kneecap are making the same achievement status as children that are not in those subgroups.
So making everybody on the same level playing field?
To make,
At the-
to make sure that all students are learning, that they're all progressing,
At the same level?
not at the same level.
So long as they're progressing.
The CIA is now just having discussions on connecting home and school.
Different.
Um,
We discussed that, just the,
members of the CIA team went to a presentation on connecting home and school. Mary Eric gave from the state, gave a wonderful presentation on how she did it as a practice in her connecting home to school, and then suggested that we do the same or something similar to help families understand a personal learning plan, for instance, for a student, to make sure that all students can learn.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
just for clarification, CIA stands for Curriculum Instruction and Assessment
there you
Team.
go.
I thought it was the CIA was in Wakefield now, going house to house.
No, no.
Clarify the acronym, because there's many of them.
I'm sorry, I should
Report.
have spelled that out. Thank you.
They're going to the Memorandum of Understanding of the University of California. I was looking at it, I mean, once again, on the consortium's website, the Smarter Balanced assessments are not compatible with our standards. Number one, and but they haven't been, according to the consortium, just last month, that they also haven't been validated. So, now that we've adopted the Massachusetts standards, all of everything that the consortium, everything you can look at is all Common Core. How are we redesigning all this Common Core professional development meetings to our standards? How are we gonna make it compatible? Because everything that I see here, it is only compatible with Common Core and not the Massachusetts standards that we have adopted.
Smarter Balanced is the state assessment that we are required to assess our students on.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I think it might be a good idea for us to invite Scott Manti from the state. He said he'd be more than willing to come up here and answer any questions for the board around Smarter Balance and
I
be able to
agree.
address Mr. Brown's questions with details. I think that would be
I think that's a
pertinent for
great
this
idea.
board.
Anybody else?
But we shouldn't be doing Common Core in this building, correct?
And we're not, Mr. Brown.
Through professional development or through any of these other sessions that people are going to?
That's correct.
On Common Core? They're not-
That's correct.
We are not.
So would you like for me to invite Mr. Manti to
Yes,
come
please.
speak to the board, presentation on Smarter Balance?
Maybe not the same presentation as the one in January that Mary was just talking about.
No,
No, that's Swift.
That's Swift.
Right.
we would do it,
Separate night.
say February.
Okay. It's all right with me. I give you.
Good now? You all set? All right, student services report.
Mine is fairly small because it was the policy that I brought to the policy
Oh.
committee. Although I do have, at the last meeting, people wanted me to share the tuitions, so I only gave it to Bob and Bonnie, so I do have a copy of the different tuitions for preschool that I was able to find, so I can pass that out for people. We have increased our Bright Beginnings by 5 students in the last month. We have 8 students in the 3-year-old program, 5 of which are disabled and 3 that non-disabled, and we have 9 students in our 4-year-old program, and 1 referral, so we'll have 10, we have, if this referral is identified, we'll have 5 non-disabled and 5 disabled in the 4-year-old program. And we have 2 more referrals that are coming in. One is turning 3, or has just turned 3, the other is 4. And we have 2 that we know of that will be coming in May through our early, through ESS, Early Support Services, which is the 0 to 3 population. So we could reach cap fairly quickly. Okay. Well,
Are you comfortable with the $1 billion that the administration at the federal level just ordered for?
I'm not comfortable with what?
Are you comfortable with the $1 billion that was just recently appropriated in the new budget, national federal budget, that addresses preschool and pre-K education?
Well, we're not accessing that money at all.
We're not.
No.
Well, that's good. But, I mean, do you think it's a good approach for, well, I guess that's something.
That
else.
doesn't have anything to do with Wakefield.
Honestly, I haven't researched it that much because I know we're not accessing it, so I
Okay.
haven't taken a look at it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our numbers in terms of out of district have gone down by 1. We have a student that moved. And staying pretty stable in the Paul School and at Spalding.
Madam Chairman.
Yes.
And just a reminder that the student that moved out of district, that is reflected in the reduction in our operating budget for next year, proposed operating budget for next year.
All right, principal's report.
Go over my notes. I'll hit some highlights here. Last month, we had the annual 8th grade auction. Went off wonderfully. Lots of high bidders. Made a big deal out of that, so we had a really good time with the I wasn't going to point anybody out. Some high bidders, and the kids made a lot of money toward their big trip. So it was great. We also had a chance to take all the students down to the Wakefield Opera House for the Christmas Carol, again with the Hampstead Stage Company, and it's just so wonderful that the Wakefield Opera House makes great measures to take our students there for free. They pay for the transportation, so we don't have to walk the kids down given the inclement weather. And a real big thanks out to Ed Morrison, who really does a great job of coordinating that for us. Parent-teacher conferences went off super last month, just before Thanksgiving. Another, what went really well was that continuation of the student-led conferences in the middle school, where the students are presenting what they're doing and how well they're progressing. And if you had noticed when you walked in the main doors, there was a TV that was in the foyer. I expect at the next board meeting, you'll see that up and running with pictures, video. Yes, Mr. Byrne? having some videos running in there, and we're playing with it right now, trying to work out the tech details. He's working hard at that, so. Anyway, that's my report. Any questions? Sir?
Are you good, Steve?
No good.
You had your dance this past Friday?
Yeah.
Is there a policy on, somebody asked me this question, so I'm asking it, about lights being left on while they're in there? I heard it was in the complete darkness most of the time.
You can speak to that.
I was there the entire time. The lights weren't completely off. All the lights in the hallway were open, and the doors, all 4 doors to the gym were open, which put in plenty of light. Enough light to where when I had to go to my office to go check something, I could see them on the monitor with the display. That there was enough light to even see them that way. The lights aren't on in there at that point, but there's enough lights from the hallway projecting in that it makes it very visible. You can tell who students are.
It was a concern that was brought to me to ask if there's a policy about lights and safety, I guess, for that reason.
Bob, and I could check on that policy. I'm not aware of a policy.
I didn't know if we
Yeah.
had basically
Yeah.
a policy in the air too.
Well, I would have a practice in the building, but I'd have to check to see if we had a board policy on that.
There's, Madam Chair, there's not a policy on lighting for dances. I would see it more as a practice in the school compared to a policy, and Mr. Gregor ought to look into.
Sure.
Okay.
Can we buy everybody those little miners lights?
It's not in the budget.
Steve, you had something?
Yeah, it's kind of funny to see this, because I was actually just researching the TVs on Consumer Reports.
Yeah.
And I happen to notice that it's a Vizio TV, which according to Consumer Reports isn't a very reliable product. So hopefully.
6 month lifespan.
I don't know whether maybe we should
we
maybe
buy the
buy a
warranty?
little insurance on it.
I hope so, because
I don't know how much you've spent on it, but
all the
it's,
TVs we have in the building now from that security thing are that same TV that you saw up front.
they're all Vizios.
They all are. They came highway.
Then we should probably definitely look into buying some product
warranties.
insurance warranties, because consumer, they were the third
Sony's.
worst out of all the companies. Vizio was rated the third worst in liability.
We're doing pretty well so far with them.
Yeah, whatever boy, you haven't even started using it yet.
No,
so
I said all.
Hopefully when you go to push it, it'll at least turn on for 5 minutes anyway, but it just, thought it was funny that, so,
So I sent you over my discipline report as well, and I'm going to highlight the second page, the one with the graphs, because it's prettier, and it's much easier to read. If you look at our year-to-date referrals, right now we're at 62. That's the lowest it's been year-to-date coming into ending November, that since Jerry and I started. You can look at the trend of the cycle from 2012-13 year to 2013-14 year to 2014-15 year, current year. And you can look at each month has considerably gotten lower. And then this month of November, you can see that it continues to drop, so we're going in the correct direction. Now, knowing that it's a trend, they won't always continue to drop, but our hope is that they don't spike. But you can see that it is going down, looking at that. I feel as though we're doing a good job. Looking at the first page, it was a total of 14 referrals, and out of those 14 total referrals, for what would be considered a true office referral, office, looking at that, you would say 57% of that was repeat offenders. So really, it's a small group of students that are taking up a chunk of the discipline, and that's being fixed or addressed and being worked with them using our PBIS model. So overall, our numbers are looking very well. Any questions? Yes.
down near the bottom, note, out-of-school suspensions were followed by inter-school suspensions for a total of 4 events, not 6.
Yes, if you look at ISS and OSS, I wanted to clarify that a little bit because that was a little bit odd. It looks like there's 6 different events that caused suspensions, when in actuality there were only 4 events. But what we had done was sent 2 different times sent a student home for the day as an OSS, and then when they came back, instead of keeping them out 2 days, they came back and had to serve an ISS so we could work with them and reintegrate them into the classroom as opposed to keeping them out an extra day. So it's really only 4 incidences, but it says, if you look at that, it says 6 events. Does that make sense? So there were 2 OSS events and 4 ISS events, but really it was a total of 4 events because the OSS accounted for 2 of the ISS events.
For 4 students or 6?
If you look, it's a total of 4 different students.
Well, what about the 2 out of school? Was that part of?
That's 2 separate students.
Is that part of the 6?
That's a
Part of the
part of
4.
the 4.
Part of the 4, rather?
Yeah.
I get it. You don't.
I just want to make sure you knew there weren't 6 events that caused suspensions. There were actually only 4. We split it up because they needed to go home that day, but they didn't need to stay out.
What happens if, you need to send the student home, but you can't get a hold of the parent?
They'll stay in the office until we do get a hold of the parent.
But what if you can't get a hold of the parent and the school day completes?
If it's that dangerous of a situation that they had to be sent home, we're not sending them home on the bus. They'd stay with us until we get a hold of the parents.
Does that count as, what would that count? Would that count as, if the...
That hasn't happened yet, so I couldn't put that in for account. If the parents didn't come at all, chances are the following day they would still be out, and then we do an ISS on the next day.
So if they weren't, that first day probably wouldn't count?
That's correct. It wouldn't count as an OSS.
Right.
Yeah, Steve, I also think it's a case-by-case basis. Nate's really strong at that. The question is always, what do we gain by having the student out another day? Rather than saying, oh, blanket, every time this happens. We really look at what, how does that student work with us in the office? If the student's incredibly defiant, typically, probably not going to have them in for an in-school suspension just because it's going to be an ongoing battle. But if we think we can work with that student on an in-school suspension, we do that quite frequently.
Yeah, well, I guess that was going to be my next question was, if you can't get a hold of the parent, the kid stays here all day.
Yeah.
Would that count as an in-school suspension day?
It all depends on what time that took place, Steve. If it took place towards the middle of the day, I wouldn't put it in that. It would be time in the office as well as a suspension.
So they would most likely still have an in-school after doing the out-of-school.
It all depends on the student, as Jared said. There are certain students.
Right.
You're correct.
Right.
Not all students have to do an ISS after they are suspended.
Right.
Because keeping them in the office isn't going to be productive. Some students, especially with some first-time offenders who you've had to send out, when they return, you want to work with them. And you want to make sure that when they get back in the classroom, they didn't fall so far behind that it just makes another behavior because they don't understand what's going over. So I use some of my teaching background to work with them and make sure that they get back off to a good start.
Okay. School Administrative Unit 64, Mr. Persing.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I provided this evening to the board under this agenda item. I wanted to discuss warrant articles, so I provided some sample warrant article language. I also provided the board with preliminary default budget, and I also provided the board a copy of the book that was given to the Budget Committee. I was going to bring it last night. That meeting was canceled, but this is a revised edition of the budget book, which includes the notes within the actual budget and also all of the paperwork that we've provided up to this point, as well as the SEU potential withdrawal budget is included in there as well. So I wanted to make sure you had this book because this is what the Budget Committee is looking at this time. So I think it would be important for us this evening to go through these specific warrant articles and have conversations or clarify anything around that, and potentially bring a board vote to the warrant so we can approach the budget committee with warrant articles that have been voted on by the board. That was my intent to do this evening, thinking that we would be having another budget committee meeting after last night. Wanted the board to see the warrants before they went to the budget committee. So if you'd like, Madam Chair, we just go through each article and answer any questions that the board might have.
Certainly.
Okay. So Article 1's specific to the election of officers. We're looking at a moderator for the year, clerk for the year, treasurer for the year, and 2 school board members for the ensuing 3 years. Okay. Article 2 is based on our negotiations with the Wakefield Paraprofessionals Union. So you'll see in there that there aren't any monies attached to that warrant, but that's the warrant language. We're hoping to finalize that soon so that we can get those numbers in there.
You have a typo in there.
Okay.
Which calls for, not fro.
Yep. Thank you.
Yeah, that's what I picked up.
Thank you. Let's see, and then Article 3, basically we asked the voters' permission to call one special meeting. If for some reason Article 2 fails, we'll already have permission to call a special meeting to address that article cost. Any questions on that?
It's a good move.
Then number 4, this is going to take a little more explaining, such as we did with the SAU budget, where Article 4 is the school district operating budget, and you'll see that the number that's in the wording is specific to our proposed operating budget as well as our federal entitlements. So that number of $9,082,032 is a combination of our proposed operating budget and our federal entitlements. And then the number below it of $9,079,670 is what that number looks like with our default and our federal entitlements on top of it. So what I've done to hopefully clarify for the voters is add the notes, which are on the next page, similar to what I did with the SAU budget, where I tried to highlight in the note that the total operating budget is offset by revenues of $273,000. Those are the revenues we get in from Title 1A and Title 2A. That's the $273,000, which is on top of our proposed operating budget of $8,809,032. Questions on that? So what I try to do is highlight in the note what the voters are actually raising and appropriating for their taxes that will have an impact on their taxes, which would be the proposed $8,809,032.
Heimlich?
Steve?
Jump on the chair.
273,000. Isn't it closer to actually 1.5 million?
That's a good question. I asked the same question. You actually do not include your adequacy grant, your adequacy aid monies into your gross budget, which is also titled the education grant, which brings us up to that $1.5 million if you included that, because our adequacy aid goes directly into offsetting the tax rate. So the monies that we get from the state automatically go into offsetting the tax rate in our reporting. However, our federal entitlements do not do that, and that's why you have to put that in your gross budget in the warrant, just your federal entitlements, not your adequacy aid.
But they're all revenue coming in.
This revenue, however, doesn't offset your tax rate, so it's part of your full budget process when you're reporting at the end of the year. Adequacy aid becomes a revenue that goes directly to offsetting the taxes, where the federal entitlements come in as a supplement to our current operating budget. Adequacy aid does not supplement our operating budget.
Please.
Has this change been run across legal?
What I need to do is, once we approve for the budget committee purposes, we'll run this through legal as well as it has to go through the DRA for approval. So your preliminary approving basically the numbers that are within here, within this warrant. However, it could be amended by DRA. And the only amendments I could see is if somewhere in the notes, but they don't really tackle the notes. They'll tackle the specific warrant article language. And the language in Article 4 is specific to the RSA, so I haven't changed any of that language. That's the required language for an operating budget.
But, I mean, where this is new this year, should we be talking to our legal and just to make sure it's, or is there, this RSA specifically says it shall have this exact verbiage?
Correct. This is the exact verbiage that has to be in this warrant, in this article. And I've been conversing with legal to develop these warrants because I had questions around it since it was new. So I've been in conversations with legal around developing the numbers as well as how I address the notes. DRA will have the final say on approving them or not. It's required. So I also did the same with the note for the default budget, and I tried to highlight, so if you look at the ballot, you'll see total default budget is highlighted, net budget amount is $8,806,670. That's the only question I'm going to have for DRA is can I actually highlight specific note items compared to bolding the entire note? That's the only question that I would think we might get back from DRA, but I'm not sure until I submit it. There questions on that article? More questions? I'm prepared to answer.
Was this difficult?
It was, and I actually wrote these warrants myself and punched the numbers. So, learned a lot over the past month and a half.
Experience as a teacher.
Mm-hmm.
Hell of a way to learn.
Go ahead, Michael.
Well, I don't know if you want to tackle, with a vote or just review all of them and then go through. How would you like to do that, Madam Chair?
Let's review them all and then,
Okay.
I think you have to have a specific vote on each one.
you do?
Right.
Yes.
So my question was, do you want me to review all of them and then we'll go back and you could say Article 4, Article 5, or just take them as as we review each individual article? That's up to the board.
You want to vote as we go along?
Would that be cleaner, I think, maybe?
Fine.
Probably.
Sure.
It's fine.
You address it while you're addressing it, vote on it. And
I'm voting against Article 1.
You would start with, you can't vote on Article 2 at this point because we don't have a number in there. You can vote on Article 3. Again, this is a vote to recommend.
I think technically you actually have to have an actual vote on Article 1. Just because on the warrant, on the bottom of every warrant article, it says, school board voted 5-0, or 4-1. I think,
Our previous articles have not had a recommend. It's not something the board would recommend. These are seats that are up. So
there's no, the board doesn't
No.
vote on the previous?
No. So you would want to start with Article 3 on a vote.
All right, anybody want to make a motion to vote? Do I have to read the whole thing or just
Not necessarily.
Okay.
Unless you want to for the public.
Article 3? Anybody want to make a motion on that?
I'll make a motion to, be the proper word? Approve or adopt? Or
Recommend.
Recommend. Recommend. I'll make a motion to recommend Article 3.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Abstain.
Article 4?
I'll make a motion.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear who made the motion on Article
Bonnie.
I did.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, Article 5 is the SAU budget. We reviewed this with the SAU Joint Board the other evening, so I've gone over all of this information at this point.
Does anybody want to make a motion to approve Article 5?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it. All in favor? Aye.
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 Against.
That's 4-1.
4-1.
Okay, Article 6 is, it's to raise and appropriate the sum of $50,000 to be placed in the expendable trust fund previously established for the purpose of updating and improving security at the Paul School. So this is what was discussed at our last board meeting, I believe, when we talked about warrant articles, and the board wanted to put another $50,000 into that trust fund.
I'll make a motion to move that article to the warrant.
I'll second it. All in favor? Aye.
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 And then Article 7 is to raise and appropriate the sum of $150,000 to be placed in the expendable trust fund previously established for the addition of a parking lot at Paul School.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Then Article 8 is to raise and appropriate the sum of $42,000 to be placed in the capital reserve fund previously established for roof repair and replacement.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Then Article 9 is the recommendation of the Withdrawal Study Committee. It reads, to see if the Wakefield School District will accept the recommendation of, that's a typo, the SAU 64 Withdrawal Study Committee and not withdraw from the SAU.
I will make a motion to not accept the recommendation of the SAU Withdrawal Study Committee.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Wait, discussion, please.
Oh,
You are asking to amend this article?
no.
No, it is, the article says that it's the, Article 9 is really saying that the Wakefield Withdrawal Committee is not recommending withdrawal.
Right.
My motion was to not accept the recommendation of the SAU 64 Withdrawal Study Committee and basically, and to withdraw from the SAU. Let me amend my motion to add that last.
Yeah.
My motion is to not accept the recommendation of the SAU 64 Withdrawal Study Committee and to withdraw from the SAU 64.
To be clearer.
Wait, I'm confused.
I know, because it's opposite. if the withdrawal committee's recommending not moving forward, that's what Article.
No, I understand that.
So you have to go do, because we're recommending to actually withdraw.
So,
Madam Chair? Just for
ahead.
clarification, I believe what Mr. Brown's is saying here is that the motion would be to not recommend this warrant.
Correct.
That's the only wording that you can put on the ballot, is whether you recommend it or not recommend it, and what that count is. You couldn't add another part of your motion. So
Well, I
wanted
was
to
just
make sure.
reading it right, you know, trying to
Yeah.
keep it right the exact same.
I understand.
But just changing not to withdraw.
So what it'll say under that would be the Wakefield School Board does not recommend this. And
So it'll
whatever the
say
vote is.
05 instead of 50?
Correct.
Or
Okay.
whatever it'll say. I don't know. Austin.
If I may I amend my motion to that, my motion is that we do not recommend Article 9?
That's it.
I'll second that motion.
all in favor? I'm sorry.
Aye.
Aye.
So, see, then there's another confusing part, because if you're voting in favor of the motion,
Right.
nobody's
That's right,
looking at the
nobody's-
motion.
Right.
No, all of a sudden, we have 5 members in favor of the motion, which doesn't support this, but nobody sees that it doesn't support that. They see it's 5-1 to support the motion.
No, the wording that'll be on the ballot would be the Wakefield School Board does not recommend
Okay.
this.
That was my motion.
Yeah.
That my last.
That's how it would be written on the
that
ballot.
My motion was that we do not recommend Article 9.
Large bold letters, not NOT.
005.
Can that happen? Can you emphasize the not?
I'm not sure.
He's not.
05.
Just bring a black crayon into the voting booth with you.
I mean, I hate to go into the booth with everybody again, but I'm just kidding. All right, so
that's the warrants that we have at this point, and
so we call the vote.
Yes, you did. All 5 of them.
Do we, are we going to vote on that tonight too?
what?
The envelope that you and Steve and I looked at?
That would be a non-public.
Okay.
Okay, is that it?
That's it.
Okay.
And you can, I just want to point out that, you know, we provided the default budget this evening. It's $2,362 less than the proposed. So it's very close to the proposed. And you'll have an opportunity to review the default prior to going to the budget committee.
But the default is less, correct?
Default is less by $2,362.
Looks like it's more, because you got 525, 757, and 517, 961.
No, if you look at page 7, the proposed is $8,809,032, and the default is $8,806,669. So that's a difference of $2,000.
I'm sorry, clarification, I was referring to the SAU.
Okay.
The SAU default is less. By
Oh, I'm sorry.
about $7,200, $7,200.
Yeah, I don't,
Give or take.
give or take. And we're currently working off a default budget at the SAU. All right. So I'm happy to speak to those warrants at the budget committee, knowing a vote at this point.
Do you know when the next meeting's going to be?
No, I do not.
I think wasn't it scheduled for the following Tuesday?
Our
No.
public hearing's scheduled for January 6th, so we would have to meet prior to the public hearing.
Last night was the third scheduled meeting. that's all we had was 3 meetings scheduled. Last night was canceled, so it'll be up to the chair of the budget committee to call another meeting.
Priscilla?
Yes, Mr. Tursi knows that I texted Jerry to ask about rescheduling, and he wanted to know about Tuesday, December 30th, to talk about the rest of the budget and warrant articles.
No, that's 2 nights before.
I'm available that evening.
You're available or you're not?
Okay.
I'm available.
I'm available.
6:30 Eastern.
But I'm not single.
Thanks for clarifying that.
December when, Priscilla?
Tuesday, December 30th. What? Am I wrong?
No, it's Tuesday, December 30th.
Okay.
It's still this year. I thought it was gonna be like
Well,
next year.
the public hearing is scheduled for January 6th.
What about January 5th?
How about,
Okay. Mr. Tursi, you had something?
I just wanted to point out, however, the wording in the number in Article 4, the operating budget, may change depending on the meeting December 30th, because the operating budget number, proposed operating budget number that I put in there still has not been approved by the Budget Committee, because it was amended at the school board level after the Budget Committee had approved it. So we removed the $495 out of school board miscellaneous and added the $2,500 in for the trailer. So the Budget Committee has not approved that bottom line. This
Okay.
warrant's developed off of those changes at the board level pending Budget Committee approval. I just wanted to make sure the board was aware of that.
so you'll have to meet after the budget committee meeting to approve your end of it, if there are any changes? The board will?
Well, may I?
Yes.
I think on that note, we might want to go back and amend that vote to state pending, pending changes from the Budget Committee.
Motion to reconsider the vote on Article 4.
Would you,
Motion to reconsider the vote on Article 4.
are you in the majority?
Jeez, I think I did vote it. No, I voted for that one.
Mm-hmm.
I voted against,
No,
I voted against the
wait a
SAU.
minute, I think no.
I voted
you
against the
voted-
SAU budget.
5-0.
So do I have a second for my motion to reconsider on Article 4?
I'll second that. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
I'll make a motion to approve Article 4 as written pending the outcome of the budget hearing.
A second for.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. That'll give us the option, if the Budget Committee doesn't make any changes and approves it, we don't have to reconvene to vote.
But-
Could you please
But
recite your,
to that point, you may want to post a meeting of the board immediately following the Budget Committee meeting, because you can't vote on and approve it under a properly posted meeting.
Will do.
Unless, we just ask for, an illegal meeting or something.
Ralph, could you please repeat your motion?
My motion
December
was
6th at 6:30.
was to approve Article 4 pending the vote of
December
the
30.
Budget Committee.
Huh?
Thank you.
It's 30th, you said December 6th.
Oh, yeah, December
thought we usually have
30th
it
at
earlier than
6:30.
What did I just miss?
Don't go there.
The confirmation of the budget meeting. What day?
That's all I have, Madam
January
Chair.
Okay.
Thank you.
Correspondence? Okay.
I have,
Go ahead, Steve.
At our last meeting, which is also reflected in the previous minutes, that the restructuring was gonna be put on the agenda, and the superintendent was going to bring all that information forward and only it just disappeared off this agenda.
It did not disappear. Ralph withdrew his request to have the restructuring done, and since he was the only one that asked for it, I took it off the agenda.
Well,
For clarification, I had heard board members state that it wouldn't make a difference what, the outcome is already etched in stone. So with people making comments that it's not gonna make a bit of a difference, I have to believe that the majority of the board is gonna go like this, and the minority of the board is gonna go like this.
We can certainly put that on the next agenda for you, Mr. Brown.
okay, because, just because the rest of the board goes like this, it's still action that needs to be completed.
We will put that on the next agenda for you.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Comments by the public? Yes.
I would like to ask about the warrant article number 9. What would our SAU look like if we chose to go the way it's being talked about, with no superintendent on a regular basis? And how is the town going to afford to run the school without being connected to Milton?
We've already looked at some of the budget, and we are gonna save some money. We will be able to afford, we'll have to put some money forward, and we'll be able to afford to still run the school. They're working on developing a plan. We don't have that set plan, like where we're gonna live and all that stuff in place yet. We're still looking at that. We think it would make sense. It would save the taxpayers some money to go ahead and withdraw from the SAU. Go ahead, Ralph.
It would provide for a full-time superintendent. So the budget that we had worked over and discussed, it does make allocations for a full-time superintendent to service our needs.
I think I would like to see clarification in the writing of Article 9. And I hope it goes before the public and gets some decent discussion, because I don't feel it's an appropriate move. But that's my opinion.
And we did give the numbers and the breakdown of what a proposed new SAU would look like. So we shared that with the budget committee, and hopefully there's other copies that we can get to you and anybody that you know would like to have a copy of that.
I feel right now, as a taxpayer here, very uncomfortable with the way you're moving without seeing it. I couldn't vote for the article, the way it stands, without knowing that knowledge. So if that information can get to the public, it would make it an easier decision for people.
Okay.
I think you're right.
You are right.
But I think that, Michael, isn't it clear that that language of Article 9 has to be that language? You can't change that. To your point, we actually used a model from the town of Fremont, which is basically the same size town as Wakefield, same number of students, same, they also send their high school students out of district. So we basically use their, and to the point where it's only a budget, I think it's a budget, but it's also a part of, or a piece of a plan, because it does lay out specific positions, and it does include a full-time superintendent.
My comment is the way the article warrant is written.
Exactly.
It doesn't state that. And so no one will know unless that information is given out. It's not the wording that I'm disputing. It's the information behind it that brought it to the table that I'm disputing.
But as I think I just said, and I believe Mr. Cersey checked on this, the state of New Hampshire dictates the language in that particular article. Well, I understand your issue, because I have the same thing, but the state of New Hampshire.
I have no problems with the way it's worded. It's just that the information is not out there for voters to make an informed decision.
Right, I agree.
We have the information that we'd love to share.
Please do.
Priscilla?
That article doesn't refer to setting up a new SAU. That article simply is asking, which is, they have to put it in there, about whether or not you are going to go with what the study committee recommended or didn't recommend. This gives them a chance to start a new study committee.
I feel it's a loaded question.
It has to appear on the ballot, either for or against. Once you have a study committee, it has to appear on the ballot whether, and you have to vote whether or not you approve or don't
But I
approve.
don't think
But it doesn't address what could happen in the future.
Yeah, I just don't feel it's a.
We'll be happy to share the information with you as we further plan. Anything?
I can give my email to.
Okay, great. Thank you. Priscilla?
Ralph said the budget committee had that information that Steve was talking about?
I believe it's in the new book.
No.
Yes, it is.
Yes, it should be.
Last page.
Oh, I'm sorry, I missed the last page.
Well, try the last page, Priscilla.
Read the book,
Right
Priscilla.
there,
What do I do without you?
would you like to see it? Well, maybe you could zoom in. Actually, it's the last 2 pages.
I'm sorry.
Okay. Motion to go into non-public session pursuant to RSA 91-A, semicolon 3, Roman numeral 2BJ.
Second that.
B and J.
B and J. All in favor?
Fall guy.
Zero.
But
Joy, aye.
Oh, sorry, I'm so
yes.